We are live now. Fellow Ambazonians, fellow brothers and sisters across the globe, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. From the Ambazonian perspective, we ensure that from the Ambazonian perspective, from the AGOVC perspective, we try as much as possible as we continue to fight for our independence. We try as much as possible to also educate our people on certain aspects of geopolitics, how geopolitics works, how it affects our situation. And we've been trying to do that with my able learned colleague, the National Economic Council chief of the AGOVC. We've been trying to do that for quite a while, and we'll continue to do so. The AGOVC is an organization that doesn't just focus on, what is happening currently. We look at structures that we need to put in place subsequently and in the future in trying to structure our nation. We have this particular segment in trying to educate our people on things that are happening on the global stage, how it affects our crisis and how it affects our situation, and what we must do as a collective in fighting to liberate ourselves. I'm joined here with my colleague, my brother in arms, to really dissect on a couple of things. We have a topic that we are going to touch on today, and our topic is the hypocrisy of the Western world, or also called global community, on how they look at the world. We try to pull situations that are similar even to our own where we find ourselves in, and we try to put it in front of our people, not to be gullible and think that we have a savior somewhere that's going to save us. We try to continue to educate our people and to let them know what we must do as a people in liberating ourselves. We try to show our people how the world works and the various, power play globally, and how we fit into that particular dynamics. Uh, One of the things also that we are going to be touching on in this current outing is global imperialism using other faces and forces to maintain the status quo. We'll touch on those two key things. And I want to welcome my brother in arms, the National Economic Council's chief of the AGOVC. So good morning, brother. And with these topics that I've just introduced, what can you say about the current dynamics, particularly like in the Middle East, and what's happening there, and how it relates to our situation, and just share your thoughts. Let's dive into it.
Good morning, brother. Good morning, Logistic Chief. Thank you so much for once again for having me. I'm glad that we are able to get together like this and have these conversations in order to continue to educate our people, because in the world that we do live today, it is very important for all of us to continue to be informed, because as we are informed then and educated, then we would know how to act. We would know how to equally prevent these things from happening to us. We would know how to what side we take, and in a world where things are changing so fast, as we continue to educate ourselves, we can be well positioned towards making the right decisions that impact not just us individually, but us collectively and as an evolving state. So thank you for having me.
Okay.
I know we are going to be having this as a form of a discussion, not just question and answers, but
Yeah.
discussion conversations between us, chipping in and sharing ideas. Um, we are trying to pick on the situation, especially currently in the Middle East. It's the media, general, especially the mainstream media, has painted this situation as if it started with the attack of, especially when it comes to the situation in Hamas and Israel, that it started with, or Palestine and Israel, that as if it started with the attack between of Hamas and incursion into Israel, like just with this incident. But we all know that this has been going on for a very long time, primarily over 75 years from the creation of Israel in 1947, the state of Israel in 1947, 1948, all the way through to today, and how that situation has evolved. So, what happened last weekend is just um, is just a reflection of what has been going on for a very long time. And as you all know, the mainstream media does not talk about the Palestinian side of the story, and most of the time, what we hear is the Israeli side of the story. So we should be careful about that. I can go into details, logistic chief, if you want me to.
Yeah, really. Just as you put it, because there is a certain narrative that has been peddled around for the past 75 years as far as the Israel Palestinian crisis is concerned. To the audience that are watching, there is a direct parallel. We'll have to draw this and relate this current situation with our own situation in our quest for our independence. It's very critical because we go into topics that affect us as a nation and what we are fighting for. Like you talk about our people not being misled. There has been, you know, for the past over 70 years, there has been a particular narrative that has been put out there by the mainstream media. They have had that type of dominance in the world stage where they have been given a one-sided story. And because of those who control the mainstream media, they have fed the world into believing into a story that is not real, the truth of the story. And you see, let's get it very clearly. When we put it as it is, people should not think that we are siding with the Palestinians, because even the Jews within the state of Israel and those out of the world are directly affected by what is going on in the current crisis. They are directly affected. And the truth is this: if this crisis is not treated with urgency and with all the seriousness, it will only increase the hatred of Jews globally. That's why we talk about it. It is not something that we condone as a people. Life is precious. What happened recently, we are not happy about the fact that innocent civilians are being killed. Just like in our own case in Ambazonia, we picked up arms because our people were being slaughtered and massacred. That's the same thing that Palestinians have been doing, and they did recently. Nobody is happy to see, the civilians being killed, mothers being, killed. No. And the truth is that they are twinning, they are giving one-sided story of this whole thing. This is what has been happening in Palestine for the past over 60 years, 60 to 75 years. The killing of their mothers, the bombing of their hospitals, the terrorization of the people, but the mainstream media has succeeded for a while, up to a certain level, in changing the narratives. And one thing I would tell you, my brother, is this: as we get into, I call it this era of information, you come to realize that the way words are used is very dangerous, and it creates a different type of narrative. People who have fought this type of battle, the wording that they use on them. Let me give you an example. Let me take you back to the case of Ukraine. They'll call Ukrainians nationalists, fighting for their country. But then they'll call the Palestinians terrorists, fighting against Israel. That is a state that is imposing itself on them. Just like in our own case in Amazonia, we are fighting for our own nationhood. The political has struggled as hard as possible, calling us terrorists, but we have beat them in the war of narrative, because we came out, we made our case very clear. The AGOVC came out, made their case very clear, define ourselves. When Achiruma came out and was like trying to call us terrorists, the president of the AGOVC went out to rioters, all international bodies, and said, we are defending our homeland. And it was very clear and concise. Since then, he shut down Chiruma. He went and disappeared for good. We took control of the narrative. So words are very important, and how they use them is very, very critical. We need to always take into consideration that as we continue with our journey into liberation. So like you said, there is a lot going on that they don't tell the other side of the story, because they want us to maintain, they want to maintain a certain narrative. Can you really, when you look at what has happened, can you just give a little bit of history behind this whole story? Because it's very important. And then I would like us to also look deeper, a little bit deeper into what has changed recently, because there's a big shift in the paradigm. What has changed recently? What has triggered this change? How can we, and how have we as Ambazonians benefited from that particular shift in paradigm? So just give us a little bit of history of, just not take a lot of time, what has been happening in that area,
right,
what's currently going on, how the world perceives it, and how narratives are changing. We'll talk on that aspect of how narratives are changing now. Just give a little bit of history on that.
Right.
Situation, this crisis.
Right. Thank you, Logistic Chief. I'm going to give a brief summary. Like you talked about earlier, we're not really necessarily supporting one side. What is happening is, like one individual once said, Martin Luther King in this case, that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. When you see injustice anywhere, then just basically in relation to the Ambazonia situation, which is another reflection of injustice, then you're bound to side on the side of looking for fairness, of looking for justice. In the late 18th century, in summary, really quickly, in the late 18th century, early 19th century, there was this whole Zionist movement um, pushing towards the creation of a Jewish state. No one really knew where that was going to happen, and that movement continued to grow. When Hitler came about during the Second World War in 1945, the movement was all in favor at that time. When the Allied forces were impacted, Allied forces in this case, mostly Europeans that were involved in their tribal wars, calling in the world wars. When they finally were able to successfully, because Hitler attacked England, they defeated the French, defeated those people that saved, as a matter of fact, without deviating here, people that actually saved Europe were the Russians. That by the time the US joined the war, the Russians had already pretty much defeated the Nazis. So with the defeat of the Nazis and the liberation of the Jews in that case, about 6 million of them had been killed.
Brother, sorry, let me give a little bit of interjection.
Yes.
Show how racism works globally. We always hear of a narrative of Russians liberating Europe. They fail to understand that our forefathers started putting a dent on Nazism and fascism in North Africa. Do you also realize that much of the fighting that was done in Europe were our ancestors who were drawn into that war to fight that battle in Europe? And for instance, we hear of the Senegalese regiment that fought and defeated a faction of the Italians and a faction of a part of the how to call the Germans who had already occupied Europe, because the French colonialists had to pull forces from Africa. They always forget that particular dynamics, because technically, if Hitler had grown and Mussolini had grown stronger and engulfed all the wealth in Africa, Russia would still not have been able to defeat Hitler. But they always failed to involve Africans as a key player in defeating Nazism. They always failed to involve us. And you see, for instance, we have a regiment that for me, I'm not digressing a little bit, Senegalese regiment that fought and, right in the heart of France. They had to evacuate them and bring them back and kill them and massacre them because they asked for fair pay. We heard during that period also. You see, this is a part of a history that at times we're waiting to put our narrative out there. Africans who were putting in the real work in the forefront, because they were used to do the real work in the front, just like African Americans that have been used in the Second World War to do the hard work in the air and land, is still now recently recognizing them. Africans who fought, and when they were about to liberate France, Paris, what did they do? They extracted most of the black soldiers, kept them behind, and then they pushed in the white forces and the French soldiers to show that they were the ones that liberated France. But the hard work in the liberation of Europe was done partly by Africans, but they never tell that part of the story. You get it? And sorry, I didn't want to digress or divert.
Right.
I wanted to check that aspect in it because they always neglect. They have always been playing this racism card from time immemorial. We contributed. Our forefathers died. My own great-grandfather, along my paternal lineage, or is one of my great-uncles, he fought in Burma. He fought there in Burma. Can you imagine how far? In containing, these are the force of the Axis forces, and came back home. One of the story my father told me. When he came back, one of these white priests was there tormenting our people, molesting them. And he got mad and slapped him. And then people were shocked. And it was like, I saved you people. I saved your asses. I carried some of you in trenches. You cried. And then you come back here in my own homeland and you are tormenting my people. He did that and stopped going to church. So I'm not digressing that much. I also want to bring that connotation, that aspect, that contribution that Africa also made in containing Nazism that is always neglected in history books. Go ahead, brother. Sorry for that.
No, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. You make a very good point there.
And also, there's something also that I want to go ahead about the issue of the creation of the state of Israel. It wasn't only peddled around Middle East. They tried to figure out how they could create that state in Argentina, in South Africa, in South America, around Argentina. It wasn't really like working well. Then they talked about creating Africa somewhere around Uganda. It wasn't really like yes, jiving well before they end up settling in creating it there. So the question now, I beg the question that becomes this: if they are laying a claim in that land, if they have created that state of Israel in Argentina or in Uganda, we have been having these issues. Why should they go and crowbar a whole nation there in Israel? Sorry, just go ahead, bro. Go ahead. I'm just trying to throw more context in what you are saying about the state of Israel.
Yeah, I think you make a good point in expanding all of this, so that way we can see we can look at the matter from every angle. And there was a conversation around creating the state in South America and also in Uganda, and probably I think further into history, that's why Idi Amin was very angry about the situation. I think if you remember, I forget the name of whether it's the Ottoman cry. So essentially, at one time, Uganda actually sent military forces to join the Arabs to fight Israel. I think that was in the Second Intifada.
Yeah.
But Israel goes on. The Palestinians for 2,000 years, the Jews overall had been displaced following the Roman Empire, so they were scattered all over the world. So no one can really argue that. It is the same argument that the Native Americans can even make in the U.S. that they were here 2,000 years before, so everybody can leave. So the Jewish have made the argument that this has always been their promised land. You can't come back 2,000, 3,000 years later to.
Brother, there's something, as you keep on talking, we expound on some of those issues that you bring up. We touch a couple of things and we have to expound on them. Now it comes to the question of who are the real Jews? Because if you lay claim to that land, we know that the 12 tribes of Israel are in Africa. They are black skin. Some are in Yemen. A lot of them are in Africa. Granted, they were the Ashkenazis that left from Central Asia and moved into that area, copied the Jewish culture, the ones that are there currently. You know, they originate from the Central Asia, copied the Jewish culture and tradition and teachings. They copied it. You know, because all these things we are putting, Amazonians should come to understand that there is a reason why we talk about this and the involvement of this state in our affairs as Amazonians. The beef is a product that is slaughtering our people, is a product of Israel, is an Israeli product. You know, so and I ask a question, because if they lay claim to that area, we had the Jews also, black-skinned Jews scattered across Africa, who were settled in that area. So, and the current one, they moved from Central Asia and came there. So now we can say that, okay, you lay claim to a portion of that area, but that real part that it is a state of Israel wasn't occupied by the current Jews that are claiming that they had that particular area. We should put context to this whole thing.
Absolutely. One of the oldest Bibles or Torah, however you call it, Jewish Torah, it's actually located in Ethiopia.
Yeah.
In Ethiopia, where the Ethiopian Jews were actually have claimed to be like the original Jews.
Yeah.
If you even think about it, when Herod had passed the order to kill every 2-year-old, Jesus does not get sent to the Arabs, does not get sent all the way further into the east. He gets sent to Egypt. Imagine that if you're like a fair complected individual and you're saying,
how do you hide amongst?
How do you exactly?
Yeah,
so there's a huge
people.
There's a huge argument to be made that they sent him among his people who would probably have been during those days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just going to that topic. Sorry, go ahead. I didn't want to digress. At times we put context to it that if they are laying claim to that land, I was just like throwing it there. Right. Which Jews are we talking about? Because the 12 tribes of Israel is scattered across Africa and part in Yemen. Let's be. And at times when you hear African Americans laying claim to the fact that some of them are Jews, they have a point there, because they were part of the Jewish tribe that was scattered across Africa that was taken as slaves to America. So they still have a point to make there, where you see, because you go right down to Zimbabwe and South Africa, there are black-skinned Jews there who practice the culture, tradition, everything, because of the push or the migration, or they were evicted from that area. So now who lays claim to that area? And there is something that also have to understand. There is a reason why the current day, the Zionist state in Israel pulled the Jews from Ethiopia into that area, because they are recognizing the fact that the real Jews, there's the history behind it. Those are black-skinned people. Do they also claim the ones that are there in Israel and the ones scattered across the world, the white skin? Do they claim that culture? Yeah, they have the right to claim it. They learn that culture. They learn the religion, the spiritual systems. They were taught by the rabbis from the original tribe, the 12 tribes of Israel. They taught them, because when they came and settled in that area, they brought in rabbis from those 12 tribes of Israel to come in and teach them the culture. Because when they came in, my understanding is this: when they came in, from what I read and researched on, the Christians and the Muslims were fighting. So they said, we need to adapt a spiritual and a cultural system, because they had known. They looked at joining the Christians. They said, no, if we join the Christians, the Muslims will be attacking us. If we join the Muslims, the Christians will be attacking us. So the Jews were there. The black Jews, Israelis were there in the Middle East. They said, okay, these people are people, they're not involved in these wars. We are going to follow their culture and their custom and their tradition. They brought rabbis from there. They went, had a conversation with them. They brought rabbis to come and teach them the culture, the customs, and tradition. They inherited that from the original black-skinned Jews. You get it? That is the story. And then they settled there till when issues occurred and they dispersed all the Jews around the area. Our own kind moved down into Africa. They dispersed now into Russia, Poland, Europe, those other countries. That's where they dispersed and got scattered across Europe.
And even and India, all the way that way. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So sorry, I'm sorry to digress.
No, you're making some. It's good that we touch on the broad spectrum of all of these issues, so people continue to be informed, because then it has a direct ramification on how you look at things and how you act to protect yourself. They say history repeats itself.
Sure.
So these things, when you're armed with the knowledge, then yes, you're bound to make sure that it doesn't really repeat and affect you negatively.
Yeah.
As we were talking about earlier, because it's equally important to understand this background. So because there's also a political overtone involved in the creation of the state of Israel. So Palestine at the time, by 1945, was under British protectorate. So the citizens that resided there at that particular point in time were all Palestinians. So Hitler gets defeated. They bring in all of these Jews. That Zionist movement becomes very strong at that particular point in time. But there was also the push by Muslims and the Arabs towards independence, because most of those states at that time were all America was at that time was not really involved in had not had colonies yet.
Britain and France.
So there was that push towards independence. In order to continue to maintain presence, the Europeans saw this as an opportunity for them to have like a satellite presence. So that's part of why they brought the Jewish people, pushed out Palestinians that were already living there. Initially, there were 790,000 Palestinians that were pushed away in order to create the state of Israel. Some of them went to Jordan, some of them went to Lebanon, some of them went to Egypt, and so on and so forth. And then Some of them went to refugee camps that were created within the area that was designated as the area of Palestine. So the Arabs were not happy at that time. That is when they formed the first Intifada, the first war, Israeli-Arab war, but at that point they were the Jews, the state of Israel was supported very heavily by Europeans and by the Americans with weapons, and also even with soldiers. That is how the Arabs got defeated during that first war. But then they go on to have agreements, and the second war happens between the Arabs. The second Intifada happens between the Arabs and the Jewish state, supported again by the Americans and the Europeans. But Egypt was able to, at that point, because in the first war, the Jewish state took the Sinai Peninsula, took some other areas, including the Golan Heights. So, but the reason for which I'm giving the agreements go on to be made, and those agreements, none of them, the Camp David Accord, Oslo Accord 1, Oslo Accord 2, all of those things, the resolutions are made in the United Nations. They are not followed by the United Nations or not followed by Israel. All of them are ignored. But the reason for which I give this background to with relation to Ambazonia, we have to recognize that when these allied countries, NATO countries, the West, they have an agenda. That agenda is basically to push Palestinians out of Palestine and create a state that will be primarily not necessarily Jewish state, but a state that would have an influence that would be more like a satellite state of the United States, essentially. So that is why categorically the state of Israel has been supported by the U.S. And well, obviously the Europeans are backed by generally just follow what the U.S. wants, and then they move forward from there. So on the other hand, the Palestinians, no one has told their story. We have talked about just what they go through on a daily basis. The average age in the Gaza Strip is basically 18 to 26 years because people don't live there long. Israel controls the water system, the medical supplies, the food that goes in there. They have a blockade on air, sea, land. Yeah. Israel has cameras that are located all over the place that they use to monitor Palestinians in the Gaza Strip. In the West Bank side of things is not very different. There is actually an occupation force, that the Israeli occupation force, that patrols the street on a daily basis. They knock at doors just to make people feel their presence. They terrorize citizens. There are streets that are discriminated upon that Jews can walk through, but Palestinians cannot go through. There are various documentations that Palestinians are carried.
West Bank, can you imagine? Within West Bank,
that's the West Bank.
And then the funniest thing is that, brother, they even inside that, the Jews are building settlements.
Building settlements and expanding the settlements. So and having different. The one that is even worse is they have a huge Palestinian contingent in East Jerusalem. So when they build these settlements, then you have a situation where you have Palestinians and Jewish neighbors all on one side, but everybody adheres to different laws. There are military laws, IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces create their own laws that govern the Palestinians, because the Palestinians technically report to the Israeli Defense Forces. So they have a separate law that governs them, and then a separate law that governs the Jewish people that are located in those settlements that adhere to basically the state of Israel. So essentially creating an apartheid state where separate laws for separate people.
Yep.
And then within those settlements that are on Palestinian lands, you have basically the Jewish, the Israeli Defense Forces that guide and protect them. Meanwhile, the Palestinians, they are patrolled on. So it is a very, very difficult situation. So to conclude this segment, you touch on a point where you've pushed people to that extent where they have gotten to a place where they cannot really necessarily take it anymore. Then so what happened last weekend is a manifestation is a blowout of the kind of treatment that the Palestinians have received over all these years. And it was not just one incident that happened. On a daily basis, over 20, 50, 70 Palestinians are killed. So it's a normalized event. So we only hear about this because the Israeli citizens were killed in that number. Otherwise, it would probably not make the news.
And just from further research that I've done, can you imagine that even the farmland in Gaza, Israel dumps sewage in those farmlands to prevent them from even farming the area? I've been to Israel. I went there I think by the beginning of this year, I was there in Israel. It's quite a beautiful place to live in. And the night after I left, I heard that there was some sort of an attack. Every attack, any reaction, they call it terrorist attack. One young guy broke into left their settlement area, went into a Jewish settlement, shot a couple of about 8 or 9 people, and then escaped back. Upon escaping, they shot him on a bike. They shot him. So one of the things that you touched on is that it's just like Ambazonia. We have begged. We've tried to negotiate, tried to reason with the Republic of Cameroon. So when we pick up arms, it's our legitimate right. It's in the United Nations Charter. You have a right of self to defend and protect yourself. I'm narrowing this situation. It's a parallel with Ambazonian crisis. And what we have seen is this: we should not be waiting for the international community to define our fate. This battle in Ambazonia must be defined by us and determined by us. If people have not been contributing, know very well that nothing is going to come from outside us to change our dynamics. We will be the ones to define our fate. When you look at what Palestinians did, that is our position. Our fighters who pick up the guns to fight fight these terrorists like we Cameroon in our territory. That is just what we have been reduced to. We have no choice. We've begged, we've cried, we've done everything, even in our own land. Then the worst thing is they call us cockroaches. They call us foreigners in our own land.
In our own land, they call us terrorists. They call us
terrorists in our own
names.
land. That is just I call it, in the Amazonian case, that's how you prepare the ground to exterminate the people. We are fighting to prevent that in Amazonia. And going back to the state of Israel, the issue on Israel, you see, there's a big difference. These guys that are fighting, they don't care whether they live or they die. They don't care because they have no life.
Right. If you see the people that got into those I forget what you call them, where it is like it's propelled by a fan on the back, and if you see the people that got into it, got in the air and went on to the rampage, I don't think they expected to come back. They don't once they go. I mean, they know that Israel has defense structures. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when you push people to the extent where they know that before I get away, I have to make sure that I exercise an impact.
Yes.
That is what tends to happen. They got in those things and flew into the state of Israel, knowing fully well that probably they were not going to make it back. Yes. Very likely.
Yeah.
So that's where you push people. When you push people to that extent, that is what people are capable of. Human beings are capable of doing when they have no hope.
I want to touch on something that there has been a general misconception about what is happening in Palestine because, as you call it, the narrative, the war of narratives. Our people, Christians, when they hear Israel, they start jumping to conclusion and defending them, failing to know that Palestinians are Christians. About 1/3 of Palestinians are Christians that are being slaughtered. The narrative of the Bible, the question I ask Christians is this: does the Bible preach the destruction of a race? You jump there and they are killing you. And understand one thing: within the state of Palestine, you have Muslims, you have Christians. I have some of them practicing even the Jewish faith, but they call themselves Palestinians. So when you hear the fun is that the mainstream media and the religious aspect has made us to be so blinded to understand. And technically, look at those really hardcore conservative Jews in Palestine, in Israel. They are racist, very racist.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And they hate the Christians. Let's be clear about that.
Absolutely. I've seen videos where they spit in front of nuns and other Christians.
Yeah. But our people get that just because we just get into this, how do you call it, utopia of, oh, Israel, oh, they're harming. No, they themselves, that the Palestinians are Christians, a lot of them. They are being killed. They are being
and the irony of it all is that the basis of Christianity is an origination of this Jewish state. Like the Jews are the chosen people, and the Jews are these. The Jews gave us Christianity. They gave us Jesus Christ, but they themselves don't even believe in the Jesus Christ. They spit in front of other Christians. They themselves are the ones that, in other words, killed Jesus Christ. The Romans, if you remember, Pontius Pilate, who was then the governor of that whole area, washed his hands that he was not going to be involved, but they still went ahead. And so the thing with a lot of us, not necessarily just Ambazonians, but also Africans, is that we've been brainwashed into this whole, well, we've been intoxicated, not necessarily brainwashed into the whole aspect of Christianity, to the extent that we fail to see the other side. We forget that Palestinians are also a huge contingent of them are also Christians. So then we are just all the way behind the Jewish state, the Israelites, that we have to, because of the Bible relationship with that, without necessarily investigating and understanding what the issues and what the fight is. Some people just say they've been fighting for a very long time, since the Bible times, but no, that is not the case.
No.
This has a different orientation. This has a different aspects to it. This has even political aspects to it.
And when you look at our people, still, that knowledge is very powerful. When you even hear the Israelis have been fighting, they are black-skinned people. Let's be clear about Israel. The 12 tribes of Israel are black-skinned people. They always call the Ashkenazi Jews as a 13th tribe that copied the culture and the religion and the faith. They have a right to do that as a people, fine. But we have to go put things to context. We have to tell our own story as black people.
You see what they've done over the years. Comrade, not to interrupt you there before you get back to your point. You see what they've done over the years when they called on all the so-called, when they called on all the Jews in the world to come back to their promised land. Anyone that claimed to be of Jewish faith basically could get Israeli citizenship like in the next day, forgetting that there are Palestinians that even live there already. But the point I was trying to make here is that as a consequence, they brought in, there is over 2 million. So out of a population of Israel, which some people have claimed 8 million, some people have said 5 million, because they knew that Palestinians their population was continue to grow, and at some point it will overshadow the Jewish state that they were trying to create. They started to bring in populations from different places that were struggling economically. Like at the time, Russia's economic was not as good as it is today. So they brought in a lot of Russians, over 2 million of them, that now became like practicing Jews. But so if you go to Israel, like you talked about being in Israel, Russian is actually the third most spoken language in the state of Israel. So that tells you that it is more a program or a plan of slowly taking out Palestinians and even the Africans that you talked about, the black Africans, the black Jews that have always like traditionally been there, cleaning up, well, I shouldn't use the word cleaning, but making the state more of a European,
Eurocentric
kind of a presence in there, and getting out the Palestinians, the natives that were traditionally there. Sorry, go back to your point before I interrupted.
So just talking about that. What now we talk on an aspect because something has changed, and we'll look at the changes and the current situation and how it affects the global Jewish family, because it's critical that we look at that also.
Yeah.
I know that if we were to talk about this whole story, we might take about days just discussing about it. And we're trying to really put it at the surface level to see how it impacts even our own situation. We always have to always bring it back to our own context. Okay. You know that the mainstream media is owned by some very heavy, big powers, major forces that will practice the Jewish faith, most of it. So for all these 50 or 60 years, they have controlled the narrative of what we perceive and what is happening there. Oh, five Palestinians, Palestinians have killed Jews, but you never hear how many, how many Palestinians have been killed by the Jewish state. We've never been hearing about that. They will dampen it. They queer down that noise. You know, they will bomb hospitals. They will throw even how to call it cluster bombs at munition at times. They have experienced all that form of terrorism as we have been listing it. But we don't hear about that. We only hear of this type of incident, but we don't hear about the killing of Palestinians in the mainstream media, or they twist the narrative, and then they silence it. You get it? So it has been happening. That's why they have been conditioning people's mind. Call it social engineering. They have conditioned people's minds to the point where we now have one story. But now I want to ask you, what has changed recently? Because you see that the paradigm has changed. What has brought about this change in people's way of looking at this crisis? Because there is a shift. I want you to throw light on that, because I tend to see personally there's a shift in the way people look at this crisis now as pertaining to 10, 15 years ago. So what can you say about that?
There are a couple of things that have moved the needle. That are, in my opinion, well, one of them being the level of education that the world as a whole has gone through in the last 10 to 20 years. Level of education in and engagement, when people's lifestyles have improved from just basic necessity, they start to worry about humanity. So you see that level of expression of humanity, not just within the rest of the populations of the world, but equally within Jews that have recognized that we can't be the only state in the rest of the world that continues to colonize other people and treat them the way that they've treated. Then there is also been economic development. China in the last 20, 30 years was not the China that we know today. If you look at Pakistan, India, all of them have now, previously we had just one guy on the block. In that case, that was the United States that defined rules and regulations for everybody else to follow. Today, you have very strong states like Russia. By the 90s, Russia economically was not solid anymore. They were just basically an agrarian and a defense industry. They've always been very good in technology, defense technology. But today they are economically solid. The Indians are, the Chinese are, a lot of the African countries too have actually grown.
Yeah.
Then with the interconnectedness of communication, with that, people have had the ability, or countries are now able to talk and stand against the United States without any fear or of any kind of repercussions. Because as you can see with the event that happened in Russia, there were people that became either neutral or stood on the side of Russia. Previously, you would not necessarily see that. People would either be silent or side with the United States. So now you see countries are coming out, and I mean even Turkey. Turkey was very forceful in its reaction, and countries like Iran have gotten equally very powerful to the militarily, to the extent that it's equally a fear that if Hezbollah and Iran and Syria partner together to go against Israel in the face of a situation where the rest of the Western world is running out of ammunition, there is a huge chance that Israel might not be able to stand what happens to it. So I think those are some of the things that are influencing some of the reactions in favor of the Palestinians.
Thanks very much, Akomri. One key aspect, even though you touched on it, is social media. You know, the mainstream media controlled by certain powers, could only put out a certain type of information for us to consume.
Right.
You know, there was back home, there was a time when something happened somewhere, the next thing we are asking of is what has CNN said? What has BBC said? What has VOA said? You get it? That was our goal. We are asking, has CNN said something? Has Canal France, has Voice of America said something? So that was our go-to. And that
was the gold standard when you listen to it.
Standards, you know, that's what we're consuming. And that's, you know, there's a rationale. It comes, let me give you a little digression. There's a reason why the Western world spend billions of dollars to maintain those media houses in Africa. And then I know I went with the second phase of this outing, we're going to be touching about Africa and then the issues, all the crises in Africa. The reason is because they spend those billions to control your narrative in Africa. They have been spending all those billions to maintain that status quo of us being poor, raggedy, nothing to offer the world, you know, misery. That has been the purpose of them putting all those billions. And that's why you even see, just a bit of digression, that's why you even see, I think it is Canal Plus bought over the Nollywood, because they intend to inject a certain type of culture and narrative in it. When you see those type of moves, you might say, oh, Nollywood is becoming popular until Canal Plus. No, it's a mind of the narrative. That is why they are coming after such heavy media houses, or when you start thriving, they will step in to take it and control the narrative. So just going back to the point I was making, the social media is an independent tool that has decimated the mainstream media. It has, because you are giving live news and throwing it out there. Right. People are seeing it for themselves. People are interconnecting more through social media. There is no time for the mainstream media to concoct the lies and give and feed us with a different type of narrative. So now the social media is the immediate go-to. People are not even believing in the mainstream media because you see the lies. And one of the biggest person that did destroy the mainstream media is Donald Trump. He just called them fake news, and it's stuck. You know, he said fake news, and it's stuck. You know, because people see it for what it is. So now people go now to other alternative media to a majority of those, most of those media houses. I bet you, if they are trying to adapt, if they continue in that line of trying to control the narrative, I bet you, man, the next 10, 15 years they're not going to be existing, because the social media has taken upon, you know, information. The information war is being controlled by the social media now. You know, what's happening in Gaza, people can film it immediately and put it out there. What's happening in, you know, they shoot it live and show it, and that's, people consume that, than you seeing people trying to concoct or change the narrative or give us a different perception about a situation through the mainstream media. You can now see a truth of a story firsthand, and then what the mainstream media trying to concoct is not going. It's not going to. It's not passing, marching what we used to see in the past. So that is one of the biggest factors that plays now currently. And when you see,
absolutely, absolutely, comrade. And people must be very careful when we look at the news, when we look at all these aspects of communication of the media. It is always important for us to understand the history, the background, the details about each story. I remember that when this fight started, this segment of our struggle in Ambazonia started in about 2016. By 2017, they were already talking about it is estimated, they would report that it is estimated that about 3,000 Ambazonians or 3,000 people have been killed. They kept that number from 2017 all the way to most reports that still come up today still state that we estimate that about 3,000 people have been killed. So when you become the story, then you start to see just how absurd these individuals are. When I say you become the story,
yeah,
I used to really believe in something that would come out of the BBC, something that would come out of the VOA, and so on and so forth. Then until you get when you adapt that story, because you understand the issue at that point, when that story is your story, then you start to see the absurdity of what the report would talk about. There was that whole comparison between or making a false equivalence between what Ambazonia does and what La Republique does. and then they will report it in favor of what La Republic is doing. They will talk about, let's take an example, they will talk about the fact that it is being reported that a group that what Karnatumi brought up, that it's been reported that the Biafrans have combined with Ambazonians to do this. Meanwhile, we knew that that was really not the case.
Yeah.
So they would tell these narratives. So that is when you start to see the hypocrisy, or at least you start to see just how wrong these individuals have always been. So it's always essential that people understand the depth of every issue. When you do that, whether it's something that is happening in Indonesia, something that is happening in Pakistan, when you do that, then you have a better understanding and can connect the dots between what other individuals within social media are reporting about the situation and what the mainstream that is controlled is reporting. One last point on this issue, comrade, it has to do with our general situation, which has equally is the media. If you see what has been happening in Africa and even in Amazonia involved included, the French, instead of trying to find a way to solve these issues or address these issues, they go on a media campaign as if to say that that media campaign would, at the end of the day, change our minds. Meanwhile, we are the people experiencing the full force or the full weight of what their actions and their policies in Africa. So by convincing me otherwise, I'm not really going to be convinced when I know that I'm facing all of these situations that is thanks to your policies that are impacting them. So when we listen to all of these mainstream media, we should be very, very careful with the news that they feed us with, because the story is told from a one angle to the extent that they want to pass on an intent. Sorry, go ahead.
You know, the story has always been told for them to maintain the domination of our people. They maintain their hegemony, their imperialistic practices globally. But this time around, with the social media, people are looking for other alternative means, doing their own research, digging things through. You know, it's due to the social media that we talk about religion. Now we can talk about certain things, the actual history behind some of these things, and you know, the perception behind it. You know, we were contained. But now with the presence and the upcoming of social media, people can research, you can learn things, you can go dig things for yourself. You know, I know of the story where people are saying that they are learning more in social media than what they were even taught in schools, you know. So that is what has changed the narrative of what is currently happening even in Pakistan. Because now, let's before we go delve onto this, let's finish and then we'll go down to Africa. But you know, like I said, we are not, we are for the oppressed people. That's the first thing. But even though there is a segment of the oppressors that don't like what is happening, because there's a good majority of Jews globally that don't like what is happening, their voices are not heard. They believe in a two-state solution. They believe in the 1967 agreement that they had, that they will have a Palestinian state that has access to the waters. The West Bank should be connected to Gaza as one state, a functional and thriving state, while Israel coexists with them. There are a lot of Jews that even live in Palestine in protest of what is happening with the Palestinians, but they don't see that segment. They understand living under the conditions that they are trying to force them to live is not going. They are not going to thrive. They're not going to be a thriving state because they cannot survive in that means. In what they are doing, they always easy because now the people are like, people will say, okay, the story we're trying to sell in mainstream media is, oh, Hamas just went in, a terrorist just went in and attacked Israeli people having fun. No. What have you been doing to them?
Right.
They can't just do that. There's a history behind, there's a story behind. What have you been doing to them? What are you doing to that parent? Most of these guys, they've lost their brothers, lost their fathers, lost their uncles, houses blown, you know. You give them with, I mean, about 60% of them are unemployed. Their employment level is about 60%. You know, they live in a dire situation. What do you expect them to do? There are Jews globally that hate what is happening in Palestine. There are a lot of Jews that hate it globally.
Especially practicing Jews.
Yeah, practicing
because
Jews.
The Torah talks about not killing your neighbor. Talks
yes.
so many things that the Jewish state is doing.
Yeah.
So these Jews are coming up and saying, not in my name.
They are calling it Zionist state. We are not part of the Zionist state. And the unfortunate thing is this. I feel sorry because with what is happening in Palestine now, it's going to raise a high level of global anti-Semitism. And it's going to affect those ones that are not in support of what is happening in Palestine. Because there are a good majority of them, even though there are others that believe in a Zionist state. But there are a good majority of Jewish people who don't like what is happening. They prefer a two-state federation. And when these type of things happen, the world always sees the Israelites as the aggressors, people who are forcing themselves into people's lives and land and controlling them and creating apartheid. That's why they keep the Israeli, the observer, they were trying to gain an observer status in the AU. But South Africa and Algeria insisted that it will never happen under their watch. They had to drag out their representative in the AU out. They dragged her out of it because they said, we cannot live with you people. Now they created a level of hate globally on the Jewish state and the people and the citizens and those who practice it. That global hate, it's being played on. And then when you go to look into the nitty-gritty of the Jewish state itself, you see the racism that they practice on the blacks who are practicing Judaism in that country. There was a time that there was reported about 100,000 documented 100,000 Falasi Jews that were brought from Ethiopia were sterilized because they were trying to curb down their birth rate. So we go right deep into what their state itself is doing. It's not healthy. It's not healthy even for those who are practicing, the real practicing Jews globally, because you now bring hate on them wherever they live and settle. People always look at them, oh, that is what your people are doing. But practically, their voices are not being heard, that we don't like what is happening there. We hate what the Zionist state is doing to the Palestinians. That's the ramification of this whole thing. Look at across the United States, look across all the universities. There is a pro and a counter. And you look at those pro-Palestinian rallies, they are bigger, huge.
Right.
And the counter is
there's been a huge awakening.
Yeah.
People recognizing that is unfortunately, if you know, there was a recent show, before you finish your thought there, Chief.
Go ahead, bro.
There was a recent show, I think it was on Sky News, where the very question that was asked with Natalie Levy, who was the former Prime Minister of Israel, they asked, now that you guys are throwing bombs on Palestinians, aren't there children that are located in these buildings too? Aren't there women? Aren't there babies? Then he was actually shocked and surprised that the response was, I can't believe you asked me that question. I don't, you must have thought. So people are getting to a point where they have gotten so contented with the fact that the media would support their narrative.
That's the point. Yes. Yes.
That's it will surprise them.
How dare you ask such a question?
How dare you ask me that?
Out of the program, you're not supposed to ask that, So people are now being, as rightfully said, bro, opening. They are open. They are seeing the injustice. It cannot go on like this. And you see, one very vocal state in Europe is is Ireland, Scotland. They are clearly vocal that this is not right. Let the upright people stand up. Africans have always taken the side of, look, we want justice. We don't want unfairness. No, just to close this part, and then we move on to the next phase of the discussion, because in the long and short is that Ambazonians in this segment that we have just talked about, Ambazonians should know that nobody in the world is coming to save us. We will fight like the Palestinians. We should be ready. And there will come a time we will have to. That's why we're saying that put the liberation tax in our hands. We will be going into Liberia, Cameroon and causing mayhem there. That is the fate, and that is what we are going to be doing. We will awaken the consciousness and beat Liberia, Cameroon by going across. People should pay the liberation taxes. What the Palestinians have shown us, that's what we are supposed to be ready to do and be ready to go for it if we are claiming to fight for our own state. Nobody is coming globally. The only dynamics can only change now because of the actions of the Palestinians. And they're directly affecting the Israelis. They were very specific about picking it up, harming the civilians. They are casualties of war. We don't support that. You and I don't support that in our platform, what we're talking about now. But the Palestinians see it as a necessary casualties of war to make a statement. because you've been killing ours. We have to go out. We don't want like what we are doing, but because of what you are doing to us, we are going to make sure you feel our pain. You get it? So Ambazonians should understand, nobody is coming for us. We should buckle up. We've just stopped. I did a calculation, brother, already on one of my shows. If 100,000 of us from the diaspora put $100, we're talking about 10 million. 10 million. You can imagine what you can do with 10 million. I know what $1 million can do as far as arming our fighters are concerned. I know. I speak as someone that has been in the field since the beginning of the armed struggle in our territory. I know. That's why we cry and we keep on telling Ambazonians, do that. I will use this show to also call on Ambazonians and their spouses. Let's all be contributing. Let's go and do. Just $100 is nothing. We have to do this by ourselves.
For an entire year.
We have for an entire year. We have to do this by ourselves. We should not wait for people to come. Nobody is coming. If we are yearning for freedom, nobody is coming. I was watching Comrade Lucas Ashu's show the other day, and he was like, one power was there in Yaoundé. I'm tired of living here. I want to go home. When I do everything possible, we'll go home. That's us crying. We all are tired. Who doesn't love to be? Before I even came to this show, you and I was watching something that someone was like saying, I'm going home. And where is home? Home is a place where you find rest. A lot of us are just wandering out of this world. But we know the solution. We are more than 1 million Ambazonians out of the world, out of Ambazonia. If we just hold our mind and our breath and say, let's put $100, all of us, we'll change the dynamics of this whole thing within 6 months.
Look at what we've been able to do with nothing.
With nothing.
With nothing. Then think about what we have the capacity to do if we could just get together in that regard.
I'm telling you,
make our payments on the liberation
just one
tax.
time. Some of us, you know, this thing has been held by some of us comrades in the AMBA-REVOLUTION. Thousands of dollars at times we put in per month and struggle. Others, we'll just say, okay, let everybody come together, lighten the burden. Just $100, $100 for everybody. We have more than 500,000 Ambazonians in North America, and they can be able to afford for, you know. And I was saying, I put it on our forums, let's be paying with our own spouses and paying. All of us should be paying. We can decide and say that by the end of the year, let all of us as AGOVCs and our spouses should have paid our own liberation tax. That bombs the figures. That should be our next priority. We have to do this by ourselves. The Palestinians are doing it by themselves, and they are changing their dynamics and their story. They're writing their story and going ahead. We have to. Nobody is coming for us. We should really, this place should go deep into our own minds. You want freedom, you fight for it. Nobody is coming for us.
We fight for it. And yes. I mean, not to continue to belabor the point, what happened to the Palestinians since 2013, 2014, that there have been discussions or any kind of negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelites. So it got to a point where, and after that 2014, they've been choking them. It got to a point where they had to find a way to bring this back into this conversation, back into the forefront, and taking actions like this. Now the rest of the world is talking about that situation and looking for a way at this moment to solve it. So Ambazonians, we have to get to a place where we know that their interest, like the French have a significant interest in converting Ambazonia to some kind of an English. They felt that if we start speaking French, then we would be more likely to align with the La République, and in that case, they can continue to control La République and control our resources and exercise. So what tends to happen is their interest, because of their partnership in NATO, their partnership with the West as a whole, their interest is not really threatened by anybody else. So in order for us to bring this at the forefront, we have to do something that gets them to a point where they know that they can no longer control Amazonia. And if you see what has happened in Mali, for example, where everybody in Mali, basically nobody there really does support them. They basically let Mali alone, at least for now, apart from the coups that they've been trying to do there. But if we can get if all that we're asking for is for you to pay your liberation tax, and if we can get to that point where we can set the the agenda on ground zero, then all of these other policies that the West does, or that because they have control in ECOWAS, they have presence in the in the African Union, they have trying to control the agendas of these big organizations. So we have to set the agenda on ground zero to the extent that then it brings the conversation to the forefront and forces either an outright defeat of La République or a conversation bring us to the table in which La République leaves Ambazonia.
You know, the point has been this: we have put the roadmap. We are not only defeating La République Cameroon in Ambazonia, we are defeating and taking territory. That is, Ambazonians should know that that is what changes the entire dynamic of this war. We are eyeing portions of the littoral and eyeing portions of the West. When we create that marker, they will come out. That is the solution that we have. That is the plan. We're not going to push the Republic out of territory. Is not enough. We are going for that territory.
And look at what the Israelis did. They went all the way and took the Golan Heights, which is a strategic location, so that way they can keep an eye on Syria. We have to create that kind of a space in which we can continue to keep an eye on them to make sure that they never set foot again on Ambazonia in the life of the state of Ambazonia.
We are going to make sure that we take our land and seize that territory. That will be the chip for negotiation. Let Ambazonia understand that. The chip for negotiation is taking part of Liberia Cameroon. And we are going that length. That is the point. We started this war, people were thinking that we were joking. When the Death Chest signed the declaration to start defending Wonderland, they thought we were joking. We are here defending it, right? We have said, the president has said, we are taking part of the Western province and part of Littoral. That is the mapper. That is the game plan. So Ambazonians will buckle up. Why? The president says it because it's unless you create a rift in the dynamics, nobody will talk about you. Nobody will come for you. And that is the game. That is the plan. Let Amazonians know. We always come and tell Amazonians the plan, the game plan. Wouldn't just hear $100 and forget about this thing unless and contribute, even call other Amazonians, help them, talk to them. Let's talk to our Amazonians in the diaspora where you see your friends along the street. Hey man, have you contributed your elevation tax? Where you say, oh, that I'm waiting for you. There will come a time that I'll ask you the same question and you tell me that our thing. But they are thinking that is not thing and we are changing. We are going to take our land. But those are people that are thinking that, oh, you undermine what we are telling you, are asking you, because now we should be the ambassador. We are selling the case. I, for one personally, when I see other ambassador, I talk to you, hey man, have you paid elevation tax? You start, I will listen to what you say. I say, I'll give the link. I give you the link there and then. Take the link, go and pay a tax and keep a receipt. That's our goal, selling the liberation tax for our agenda and making sure that people pay. And when they pay, you will see the difference. There's a plan. But let's dive to the second part of this show, bro. Now, we talk of the world dynamics and how you see the imperialists and the key players trying to come up with a new formula. And a new formula that I see now is they are trying to use other forces and faces in maintaining the status quo, maintaining their hegemony of imperialism and world domination. Case in point, let's touch on let's go to Africa ground zero. Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea. So just throwing it out there openly, what are you seeing in that perspective? Using other forces to maintain the hegemony and the status quo. What are you seeing in that area of West Africa?
Right. Chief, I think we touched on this a little bit earlier, where we've asked the question, how did Britain, this very small island, able to at one point control the entire world? See, you talked about how they took forces from India to come and fight in Rhodesia. They took forces even in Nigeria to quell an uprising that was happening in Ambazonia at some point. So they've been able to use us to control us per se, and that is one of the ways that they've done so. During the time what was happening in the Sahel region, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Chad, they formed what they call the G5 or GSEN organization to try to see how together they could combat these terrorist forces, jihadist forces. But then the French came in and then they set up shop within this organization, and they were the ones that were then driving the agenda. ECOWAS, they've gone to a point where instead of the basis of this being that we're going to use some different faces to try to fight our wars and maintain the status quo.
Yeah.
Right now, I just want to come back a little bit before I go back again to where we are. Right now, the US is having trouble with recruitment of people to join the US Armed Forces. So if you have a situation, because people are...
So let me just interject. And do you know who are the biggest proponent of fighting against US recruitment? The veterans. The veterans that have borne the brunt of not being taken care of and the wars that we've been fighting globally. So just throwing that out there, then you can know how bad it is.
Absolutely. And from what we talked about, what the media has done with the opening up of the media, there's been a lot of understanding that a lot of these wars are not necessarily to benefit the United States of America as a whole. It is meant to benefit the neocons, who are the people that will either go forward, and then the U.S. Army comes in to defend their interests, their business interests, or who are the people that the U.S. would open these markets and then they would establish businesses, their businesses, and then move income. I mean, there's some stuff here that I don't really want to go into per se, because what is really happening, if you look at right now, there are 3 companies that control in the United States that control over $32 trillion of assets. These companies are Blackstone, Vanguard, and Hathaway. This company that is owned by this Berkshire Hathaway. When I say assets, it means therefore that these companies invest in these other big companies, so they basically hold a huge share within those companies. So those companies now go out there to invest money into various countries, then use the U.S. Army to defend those interests. So not for the sake of the U.S. state as a whole, but for the sake of their own personal benefits, business interests, neocon interests. So they've set up presence within the IMF. The IMF, they control how they can use the IMF to control these countries in terms of putting them in debt, and that's a whole other conversation. These are really big topics that we can take years to have conversations on. They control the World Bank. They have control inside ECOWAS. So now, because of inside the inside African Union, because of those controls and those buttons that they are able to push, they now try to use those institutions or those organizations towards maintaining their control, maintaining their power without them. So you see an instance like in the case of what was happening in the Sahel. They were trying to use ECOWAS forces to fight their war, to protect their interests in Niger, Burkina Faso, and all of those places. Meanwhile, you don't see them in there, but they are the ones calling the shots. They are the ones pushing the buttons. So,
talking about that, as you rightfully said, ECOWAS, AU, you always see them coming to condemn coups in Africa that is not controlled by the West. But other coups, like constitutional coups, they don't talk about it because they are the Western are the ones that pull those strings. Because there are 2 types of coup: the military coup and the constitutional coup. And the constitutional coup has become so common, where you just change the constitution and then you sit in power to continue to please the West. Now you see, like for example, you talk about the ECOWAS. The dynamics of the ECOWAS in this case, where I said they're using other forces to control and maintain the status quo. France is not present in the West African countries, but because of the French interest in Nigeria, they have a huge interest in Nigeria. They are able to pull the string of forcing their hand in going into a war with Niger. Because also France controls Alassane Ouattara of Ivory Coast. That's why you hear them talking about trying to push this. It's not for the interest of Africans. And the question I asked myself when I saw all this thing going on was like, how comes we are killing ourselves for other people? You get it? And people other people's interest. Just like talk about the difficulties of hiring, of recruitment now happening currently in America. That's because people are beginning to become aware of the fact that the recruitment of those soldiers are not meant to protect America. They are meant to protect other people's interests within America, not the American state. You get it? And then all veterans have seen how they have suffered. And it wasn't for the state. They said they were dying for the flag. It wasn't for the flag. And I had a veteran asking a question sometime. We go to Iraq and kill Iraqis. How does that benefit Americans? The oil that is in that place, is it coming to American coffers? No, it's going to people's coffers, not to the American state. And he said, morally, that is not American property. You can't claim that it's American security fighting there. Why they are not threatening us in America? You get it? You can't say you're fighting in Syria to prevent them from hurting America. How? How are they sure that they want to harm you? So he started asking those questions. He started saying, oh, we are not fighting for America. We're fighting for the corporations, the multinationals, not for the state. And we're bearing the brunt of that. After that, those wars with the scars, psychological, emotional scars, we have the dumb us as the back of potatoes. They look for more recruits, and then they start pushing into the boat to continue the cycle. So,
and when these guys come back, the United States government doesn't really necessarily take care of them. You see a lot of the homeless people that are on the streets.
Yeah,
they're all veterans.
You get
psychologically damaged. No one is saying let's put in the investment to see how we can take care of these people. Basically, when they get psychologically damaged like that, the easy way is sometimes police officers just shoot them on the street, or they get involved in drugs, they get arrested and locked up forever, throw away the key. So
and there's a high level of suicide in that community, the veteran community. The high level of suicide. So not even going to see maintaining, or let's stay in Africa. So they were going to use ECOWAS to attack Niger for the French interest. But good thing, as we said, social media again, once more, it brought about a conglomerate of Africans globally to stand up in one voice and say it is not going to happen. The pressure on social media, even the Nigerian parliament had to say, Tinubu, you have no right to take soldiers into Niger. You are breaking the constitution for you to do that. You have no right to order soldiers to go into Niger. Because of the social media strength and the black collective globally, because it affected the diasporans were behind this. In the whole world was saying this is not going to happen under our watch. That is what even slowed down the intention. But before the social media era came to fruition, to maturity, you could see that they succeeded in doing that with Yahya Jammeh of Gambia, because Yahya Jammeh of Gambia was protecting his oil wells that he discovered. They were coming to rip his country dry from the oil wells, and then collect the oil, and then give them some few millions. He said, no, it's not going to happen. But that's the oil. It's my people. And then the next thing Yahya Jammeh did was, he said, what is Commonwealth doing to me? I sit there with these people. I contribute 10 francs and I gain 5 francs. What's the point? I don't need it. You go to one day and sign a document and say, I'm out of Commonwealth. The Brits said, it is not going. This is a bad sign. It's not going to happen. So when they took the opportunity, because if everybody was like discovering the fact that the Commonwealth is a sham, we are there contributing and opening up our nation and our resources for the Westerners to use it as a tool to exploit us, because that's the purpose of those organizations. If this guy can deliberately break away from
they use the United Nations, they use the ECOWAS to legitimize their action. Say this is the ECOWAS acting, as opposed to the fact that this is a path towards us getting our goal, or this is the UN voted for us to go into Libya. Meanwhile, it was them so they use these organizations to legitimize their actions. Towards protecting their interest.
Yeah. So Yahya, when they took opportunity and kicked him out because he won that election, but they said you didn't win that up. Now, because it was a small nation, ECOWAS could squeeze him, doing the bidding for the Westerners. So that was already an opposition that was going to change the paradigm. So like, I can get on one day and say, if every African country can say, hey, this guy has gotten out of this thing and he sees that he has proven that this is not helping us, I'm out. Then already that particular niche that they utilize in exploiting us will be disintegrated. That's where the British still use they pass through it to exploit Africans and other parts of other indigenous people globally. So they said that was a threat to the system. They had to take him out. Now, coming to the issue of the Niger case, because of the social media and the popularity that has gained, they could not succeed in using other forces, the French, because they're not there. They cannot do anything in fighting it. That's the strength of the social media. That's what has helped in holding that. Going now to the next phase, still on the aspect. You talked of the US not having the manpower this time around and resource to fight. Look at the issue in Taiwan. They're trying to launch a war with China. But now what are they doing? Galvanizing forces in Philippines and other Asian countries, South Korea, Japan. They want to use those forces to do their ability to fight their war with China. But then, again, the other people are like, who are our biggest trading partner? China. Why should we hurt our economy? Even the Taiwan, his biggest trading partner is China. It's not the US. You get it? So that is the insidious manner in which they are utilizing other forces. Now you see. Go ahead, sorry, bro.
Look at what they've done. China comes into Africa. China signs these economic agreements. They're building roads. They're building stadiums. They're building infrastructure as a whole, which is hospitals, which is what Africa generally needs, which is what Ambazonia needs.
Yeah.
The Americans come in, they're like, they create this boogeyman who essentially is that you're under threat and we're here to help you provide security. Then they sign security pacts. Like, you haven't seen any African nation go to war with another African nation. No one is threatening another person. Instead, all of the wars that have been fought within the last 100 years have been wars that have been brought to Africa by the West. So then they sign contracts like the one that they've signed, in military arrangements like the one that they've done with Kenya to establish a military base in Kenya. And then in the context of all of that, they're taking Kenyans now to go to Haiti to fight their war in Haiti. They go into the Philippines, they create military bases, they have arrangements with Japan, so that at the end of the day, the people that are fighting their wars here and there, look at what is happening in Ukraine. They wanted to go after Russia, and they themselves did not send forces to go fight with Russia. They use Ukraine. Ukraine creates laws that they knew Russia would not tolerate. The laws being that as soon as they put this guy Zelensky into power, Zelensky passed a law that said you cannot speak all of those Russian-speaking states that were located to the east of Ukraine. That you can't speak Russian, you have to start speaking the Ukrainian traditional language. There were some other rules that were basically meant to wipe out the culture of those previously Russian-speaking, knowing very well that Russia was not going to tolerate that. And because they oppose those things, then the Ukrainian forces that they have been training for the last how many years, then they now went to fight those people in the Donbass, knowing very well that Russia would not tolerate it, that Russia at some point would get into the war. Russia asked for an agreement, a conversation. They ignored him, and to the extent that it got to a point now that Russia got to the war, then they went after Russia with all these sanctions, sanction regime to try to bring Russia down. Which was the original intention.
Yes.
So we're talking here about how they've been using various pockets of to fight their wars.
Yes. You talk about the case with Haiti and Kenya. We have crisis in Africa. Instead of Kenyans focusing in Kenya, you go to a country, they don't speak their language. You don't understand their culture. They will call what is happening in Haiti as gang wars. No. Those are people fighting against the imperialist structures in Haiti. They are revolutionaries. That's why I started by saying that what are weapons that are very dangerous. The way they define you can create a different narrative. Now, let me put it this way. Haiti, and I also talk about this, we're talking about geopolitics. Haiti is supposed to be an AU member. Haiti is the first Black republic that paved the way for real, genuine freedom globally. Africa is not doing any favor in leaving Haiti out as a member of an AU. Haiti, by influence and godfather, is supposed to be a member of the AU, and they have been applying for it. But because of why you are saying that, because AU is being controlled by puppet masters, they refuse Haiti from being a part of the AU. That's the fight that the Pan-Africanists should be fighting, to bring Haiti.
Divide and conquer, yeah.
Yes, to bring Haiti into the AU is very critical. Those guys fighting on the streets of Haiti, they are not just armed gangs. They are fighting against the imperialist forces. You and I had a conversation the other day, you were telling me that what? Aristide was a real Haitian that was voted and put in power by Haitians. They kicked him out of power twice.
The US and special forces, yes.
Yes, take him out. That is someone that is voted by the will of the people. Just like we draw inference, let me just go. Like Hamas was voted to power by the Palestinians.
By Palestinians.
but Israel and America toppled it. You know,
just like in Egypt, the Muslim Brotherhood was voted in power by the Egyptians.
But
and then they used the military with this Assisi, the general, to take over power in Egypt.
So that's a game that they've been playing. You pulling their strings from different distance, when you look at what happened in Haiti, Haiti has been a land of resistance from the inception of that nation. Those guys you hear that they're calling gangs, no, that's how they define them. They are refusing foreign interference in their country. They understand that the people that are sitting in positions in Haiti are US puppets. Even the current president that went to the UN and was like saying that they need interference, or no, he is doing the bidding of the US. The former president was killed, wasn't playing according to the programming. They killed him. And the people who carried out that killing came from here, from the US. They killed that guy because he wasn't going to sing dance according to their favor. They brought in an impostor singing the song and the bidding of the US. That is why now he will go in the US and say, oh, we want foreign intervention. Now, because they could not put their faces there again because of the previous saga that had happened there, the bad history of putting US went there. The history was not good. The UN went there, brought cholera, brought disease and rape and the rest. It wasn't good. Now they are coming to take now Kenyans far off the east of Africa to say that they're going to go bring security in Haiti. What do they know about it? What do the Kenyan police know about Haiti? What do they know? The language, the culture, if they don't even have any clue about that. How do you install peace? How do you bring about order in a place that you don't even know jack about? They are just doing the bidding.
And in a place that you were not welcome, it's not like they invited them in the first place.
Yes. People have said.
The Haitians have been saying that we do not want any foreign interference in our country.
Yes.
Now that they're bringing in Kenyans. But one thing in context of what you're saying, comrade, is the fact that we as a whole, as Africans and African diaspora, we need to get to a place where we come together to protect our interests and eliminate all these individuals that have been placed to push a certain agenda. When I say
Yes.
protect our interests, I mean if you look at the Caribbeans, including even all the
Yes.
way to Cuba, South
Yes.
Africa is largely free today thanks to what Cuba did. Thanks to what
Sure.
at the time when South Africa needed them, Fidel Castro sent armed forces, made those
Even
sacrifices
Angola.
to
Even
go fight
Angola.
Angola. Exactly,
He
to
lost
go fight
2,000 forces in Angola.
to Angola.
2,000.
So we need to get to a place as Africans too that we can provide the same kind of reaction towards some of these activities that are happening in places that they have predominantly like Haiti
Yes.
and any of these other
And
islands
Island.
to try to assert the fact that these are still part of the African continent and African diaspora. Um,
Yes.
in, in that regards, but when you have an African Union that is funded 80% by foreign governments, it is very difficult for he who pays the piper calls the tune.
Sure.
So the African states need to be paying. Look at what Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso have done in kind of like a union to come together to form strength. That,
That is that is that is the, I call it the seeding of the real Africa that we want. They are forming a confederacy that should be expanding. And with that, it shows, you see the buffer that it created. All the noise about ECOWAS coming and rest, that compared to military alliances, everything, it created a buffer. And that sent shockwaves across the West and across the colonials and the imperial jackals, as I call them. It sent a shockwave to them. Because if this same story and narrative continues across Africa, this is the real freedom we're talking about, not in pieces. The confederacy that they have created. Man, there's something else to talk about. I still have some reservations when it comes to Guinea. I don't know. I don't know whether Guinea Conakry. I don't know because it's a bit effy there. I don't know whether those guys are really. What are they playing? Is it a double game or is it the Mamadou Doumbouya? Is it part of the agenda, or is he trying to stay within the African agenda and is being undercut by the West? Is he a program of the US or what? What can you say about him? Because he's an outlier that I look at times and it seems as if I'm not really 100% down with him.
No, absolutely. Mamadou Doumbouya of Guinea, he is a creation of the West, and he knows that there is a certain level of interest of the West that he has to protect. And in order to his power is owed to the West. He came into power thanks to it was a Western driven coup. So he knows what he has to protect. At the same time, within him, he has a certain level of limit to what he can do as a nationalist. So he's trying to play the game of
Yes.
securing the interests of the West, and at the same time, as a nationalist operating within the context of the other states. If you remember, during the time when there was a huge blockade in Mali, he
Yes.
opened up. He allowed his seaports because Guinea has flows into the Atlantic Ocean. He allowed his seaports to continue when ECOWAS blocked Mali. Allow his seaports to continue to be used to provide stuff into Mali. But that did not really push the limit to what he can do. But at the same time, overall he's in between. But you cannot really be in between. You have to choose.
Right.
You have to choose a side.
You're right, because I tend to see him as that sphere where the US airboat France out of Africa. That's what I see. I see like the US airboating France out of that area because Guinea, they are the second or the first producer of bauxite globally that is used in making aluminium for planes and all that stuff. That's the second or the first globally in the production of bauxite. So I didn't hear much noise from the US when he airboat when Abercrombie was kicked out. he is like entrapped because he wants to be a Pan-Africanist, but at the same time, his hands are tied. As you rightfully said, his hands are tied. He is for Africa, but as you rightfully put it, the way he came in is a bit, rough at the edges, that he can't fully, because I was expecting and anticipating him being a part of that confederacy. But now I hear of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. I don't know whether he's part of the confederacy that they're trying to create.
He's not part yet. I think all of this is being driven by the Russians, and the Russians are not really behind him yet with their full support, to the extent that he will feel more safer. There's been a recent strategy, if you've been observing, a recent strategy of the West, whereby these individuals criticize the West. You have like Akufo, if you remember his very first outing that he had with the French president, standing there, and we all thought that, yes, this is the guy that we want. And if you look at what the Gabonese military junta is doing right now, doing the things that, like arresting individuals for corruption, and doing the things that you would think is a nationalist, but at the same time, so they try to present a position of moderacy, which will get the support of the people and prevent any kind of coup. But meanwhile, we all know that, I mean, even look at the Kenyan president. The Kenyan president goes out and he talks about the West, blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, he's the one still associating. I mean, even all the way to the previous Kenyan president, they were all pretty much functions of the West. I think they recognize the fact that if they have those kinds of what they did to the West did to Zimbabwe, that it would have a huge impact on their economy, and that is what they did to Nana Akufo of Ghana. That he was trying to resist. They went after his economy. Now his economy is in shambles. So now he has to play that double-sided role that we've talked about, the president of Guinea.
Yeah, you make it very good. And the last part of the last segment of our discussion, you just flew right into, because I said this other part was like the forces and faces in maintaining the global imperialism. Because you see people talking Pan-Africanism but acting anti-Pan-Africanism. It's good that you touched on Nana Akufo. He will speak strong and tough, but when you see his actions, he's totally anti-African, anti-Pan-Africanist. How can this guy come to you at the US and he's snitching on Burkina Faso and Mali? Or they are brought. You came to US, instead of talking about your own business interests with the US, you are talking about Burkina Faso bringing in mercenaries, or they are going to visit Russia. How is that what has that got to do with your own interests?
How does that
do? You get it? So he speaks Pan-Africanism but acts anti-Pan-Africanism. Because I always say this, like you and I, as Ambazonians, we have a total understanding of the context of being a Francophonie or living on a Francophonie influence and an Anglophone, Anglo-Saxon influence. We have that total understanding that only us can have that that knowledge. Those Francophone, those Anglo countries were colonized by the Brits or the Portuguese. They cannot understand our dynamics in Ambazonia. Only us Ambazonians can understand, because we've experienced both of them. And when we fight and we stand and support all those other Francophone countries breaking away from the French, people like Ruto and Okufo should shut their mouth. They don't understand the dynamics. But anyway, it boils back to the fact of us, goes to the topic of what you just raised on speaking Pan-Africanism, using big words that you want to hear people talk, listen to you. But what you are doing is anti-Pan-Africanist. Ruto is now, when all these guys, these freedom fighters were breaking the chain of enslavement in West Africa, Ruto was the one coming and condemning it and saying all sorts of crap about what these guys are doing, why the entire global black family is praising them. Then you, Ruto, come out because you have to speak the word of the colonialists and your puppet masters in condemning it. We didn't expect you to condemn it. You would have just stayed quiet.
Right.
The other African nations president who would have sat quiet. But because he's been on the world stage, being puppeted or hyped, as, oh, this is an African coming. So people are, it switches our mind to think that, oh, everything that Ruto stands for is good. No. Ruto speaks Pan-Africanism, but Ruto is anti-Pan-Africanist. He's anti the progress of Africans. That's why he's sending forces now to Haiti. That Haitians have said that, don't you betray the African cause, don't you betray the black people's cause by sending these people to come to our own country, because you will make us to kill our kind. You are being used. They have told him that. They have done census on the streets of Haiti. We're calling Port de France and Port de what in there. They have done that census. They have done census in Kenya. The Kenyans don't want it. The Haitians don't want it. The president of Haiti is saying that, oh, we need foreign intervention. Oh, he welcomes Kenyans coming in because he is the puppet of the West.
He is the puppet of the West. Haiti has struggled throughout its history. They have this mineral that is only located, uranium, that is only located in Haiti and in South Africa, that the West has once. It is used in making like spacecraft because it can stand a tremendous amount of heat. They say that just a kilo of it cost about $4,500, just a kilo of it. And imagine how many kilograms that is being extracted from there. So the US has been using like security companies like Blackwater and other, but in this case, I'm just using Blackwater. That's not the primary security agency that is in Haiti, but using third-party security agencies to secure those interests. And that is part of the reason. And also, there's also a water dispute between the Haitians and their next door neighbor, Dominican Republic. And so as a result of that, the Haitians have gone to almost like trying to revolt against their president. So a president with a puppet. And in this case, then the US doesn't really want to intervene, present a face like they generally have done in other places, like they're interventioning forces. Then so using people like the Kenyans, using I'm sure that they will come up with another, maybe Ghanaians in this case, who are another puppet state to try to represent that interest. If you one of the things that we should also point out before we move to the next topic or come to an end is also the fact of Syria. What happened when they wanted to control Syria, remove al-Assad and control Syria's oil, they use ISIS. Believe it or not, ISIS was also their formation.
And it's documented.
And a lot of times when they want to use these third-party organizations, they bring in some kind of religious overtone. Like if you think about Mali, when they talk about jihadis, Mali is a predominantly Muslim state, just like it's Burkina Faso and Niger. But how can you be a jihadist and fighting against an already Muslim state? So they come up with this. That's part of the way that they recruit. These other third-party organizations that they use, they recruit people that they can preach this religion that we're trying to make this, like they're not very religious enough. We're trying to bring in and this fundamentalists will then join this group.
Same like Boko Haram.
Same like Boko Haram said that we want to. Look at when they do not have any kind of a mission statement. Boko Haram comes that we want to remove all secular education from especially from northern Nigeria, Kano State and the rest. Meanwhile, these are already Muslims, so they come up with statements that do not make any sense, but which will provide the impetus for easy recruitment. ISIS comes into Syria, and people come. The whole idea of forming a caliphate state that would move from Iran and through Iraq and into Syria entices some people that come from Europe to come and fight. But meanwhile, they don't recognize that they're fighting for the interest of the United States and the West. But then Russia did not let them. Russia then sent forces and sent air defense systems to clean them up. So that's why Assad survived, essentially.
Even the president of Central African Republic, he survived because Russia stepped in. Exactly. He has about 80% control of his country because Russia stepped in. Meanwhile, the French were supporting the rebels.
The rebels, destabilizing, keeping them in a state of destabilization for long periods of time. We talked about Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. See what happened in those states where they were maintaining them in constant disarray. so that way they could continue to take on their
Exploit.
resources. They use all of these third party jihadists until Russians. The Russians came and provided security to, they call them Wagner forces, Wagner, but the Russians came and provided security to this state and advice for everything that they're doing. And I really like to mention this really quickly, which is the fact that in protest of what the state of Mali did, the Air France decided to cut off flights between France and if you know where the Mali is located, and then Niger, these states cover a huge stretch of. I mean, Africa is huge.
Yes,
cover a huge stretch of land. So by them blocking their airspace, imagine how if Air France is coming to Cameroon, for example, they have to fly and maybe go through Ghana or all the way to Kenya side to then to come back and block their airspace. So when they stopped those flights, the Malian government and the Nigerian government said, "Okay, you stop the flights, that's fine."
Yes.
Then when they started losing money, just in Mali, they make about 500,000 French francs a day per se. So just in Mali, if I have that number correctly, the Malians said, "Okay, that's fine. You stay away." And then when they started to come back because we're losing all that money,
they refused. No one.
so we don't. And we talked about how they implant these individuals to have influence. The individual that was controlling the transportation department, transportation ministry in Mali, went on and agreed with them to resume flights. And Assimi Gota, the president of Mali, looked at him as having betrayed the cause, betrayed the country. Because decisions like this, you're supposed to consult with your government, consult with the foreign ministry, consult with. He didn't consult with anyone and just agree with the French. So he was equally fired. So we need to get to a place where if we identify these individuals that are working contrary to
our
the spirit of the revolution, even what we just did in Ambazonia, individuals that are like blacklegs per se, that are working in contrary, these people need to be fired. They need to be taken. They need to be removed from the influence.
I say it openly. Like I said, we reach a point in this revolution where I said currently it's just like you see this Hamas dude. As far as my relationship with Puerto Rico and Cameroon is concerned, you see these Hamas guys acting the way we said that they were going, where they're going to live or die. I say it clearly. If you are a collaborator or a traitor, there is just no. Do you know how many forces we've lost, brother? Do you know I am in defense? Do you know how many? When you look back at the intel we gathered in Momo State, I mirror it with what happened in Bui. One of our best generals, Ebube, was taken out by specifically identified, tracked, and taken out at a particular time, assisted by a lady, and was guided by these collaborators and traitors. When you heard that they hit the Yellow camp, they came in specifically in that operation. Let me be clear. Only the general was killed. General Hassan. He's the only one that was killed. They knew exactly where he was staying. They knew exactly his movement. They knew how he was supposed to move if he were leaving his places, his location where he was sleeping. And they killed him. He was the only guy that we lost. So when you hear me at time when I come out and I'm making it categorically clear, any confirmed collaborator or traitor must be taken out, not only quietly, executed in public. So they see and know the consequence of that. We are not initiating this. This is not an Amazonian modus operandi. No, it is a clear war normalcy in a normal state. In a war situation, historically, till now that we are speaking, you commit treason, you know the ultimate penalty. And to me, that was a litmus test. Anybody who is talking that is starting the profile and say, "Oh, Ambazonia." If you come as you always see some hoodlums coming after this type of activity, you come openly and squarely against it, then you are not for this revolution. There are lots of litmus tests that we have in this revolution to prove who are the genuine and the die-hard liberators of Ambazonia and those who are just like following the cloud or chasing cloud or creating space in the social media ecosystem. These are the things that we treat. We stand. We've always taken a very difficult pathway from the AGOS and the ADF standpoint, and we will follow it through till the mission is completed. That was a digression, brother. So, we're talking about, people being used from within our systems in the African context, even within the ambassadorial context, in the African context. Recently, you still see people within the Burkina Faso government. Some soldiers were trying to also create an insurrection or an uprising to topple the government. When you catch those type of people, you are in cleansing your state, you have to know where you go. That's the same attitude that Jerry Rawlings utilized in Ghana. Even his own cousin or really family member was caught in the act of treason. He executed the person in public. He gave the order for him to execute in public. So you need to get to that point of putting nationhood first before anything. Then you will meet your goals and your objectives. And since what Jerry Rawlings did till today, that was the foundation of Ghana till today, because they built on that. And Ghana has become what it is today because of what he did. So when you see people like Nana Akufo coming and trying to mess up the game, you should be calling him out for what he is doing. And the beauty about social media is that Africans are now beginning to attain a point of maturity where if something happens in Zimbabwe, someone in Togo is crying. Something happens in Egypt, someone in Gambia is crying. So we are slowly getting to that point of coming to that understanding. And we'll get there. We'll arrive at that point. So I don't know if you have any closing remarks to make as far as this our topic is concerned. I mean, because we do it as a form of educating our people and knowing where our position is and knowing what we need to do as far as the geopolitics is concerned and as far as our revolution is concerned, so that people should know exactly what we are fighting and how deep we need to get involved in trying to free ourselves. So just give a general remark and general comment, and let's close this out, and then we can now prepare our people for the next, outing we're going to do.
Right. We touch on the aspect of the fact that a lot of people, when people are subjugated for so long, we talked about the fact of the use of individuals that are working contrary to the aspirations of the people. We talked about the fact of the media, that we should be aware and careful when we watch the traditional media and even the general social media. It is always very important to understand the history, because then understand the aspects of any situation, because then it gives you a basis for to be analytic. So therefore, by understanding the situation, you can easily pick out those points that will help foster your own aspiration or which way you stand on any issue. So with all of this put together, this should continue to form the basis of education for Ambazonians. We do not want a situation where, I mean, education is very important. Education on not just formal education, going to school and learning what or cramming the material that you're being taught. In many countries right now, they're not even being taught general education per se. They're being taught critical thinking. You're presented what is factual, and then you use that to analyze and critically think, and then that would enable you not to write and study for a test, just to test or cram things and go pass an exam, but to be a critical thinker. And that is one of the aspects, without deviating, that is one of the aspects which the French educational system in most Francophone states have failed, because it is meant for you to cram work and then go pass a test. It is not meant for you to be critical and be innovative.
I call it some sort of, I call it it's a control tool. A control that the education has been a control tool in keeping people maintaining a particular status quo. That's why at times I'm sorry to really say this. You see some people with the PhDs, I look at their critical thinking. I look at how they cannot even go deep in dissecting certain things. And you ask yourself, is this someone that has a title of PhD, but you don't even perceive this element of critical thinking to be able to look at something so simple as this, to dissect and diagnose and understand that this the rationale and the way of thinking is different. I mean, it doesn't really it doesn't really hold. I say this because I even say it and relate to our own crisis, where some people carry the title of PhDs, but you look at that critical thinking skills, you look at how they look at things, and you ask yourself, is this man really a doctor? It's because of the type of education that we were processed through, and what we I mean, what that they churn out and through into the society. That's why we have this type of dysfunctionality amongst us or within our community or within our society. Sorry, I'm not taking.
Oh no, it's always important to provide context and that insight. And against the background of the conversation that we're having, why would you want to be the one that tries to interrupt and push astray the aspiration of a people? Why would you want to be the one that collects a few dollars? Meanwhile, you could be Ambazonia. We've talked about Ambazonian being one of the richest people. Imagine we could be a 3, 4, 5, $10 trillion economy very, very easily. Why would you want to accept? Why would you want to accept $100,000 when you could be making $300,000? Why just to?
And it's not just about you, about your generations to come,
and your generations to come. And why would you look at all of these mummies and these papas that are struggling to make ends meet, carrying things on their head to sell just to make 200 francs a day to buy?
Why you can have roads? We can have roads that you can even help their agriculture. You can improve on the agricultural system, giving them the tools to have better agricultural resources to farm their food and create roads for them to transport their goods to the market with ease. You get it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And we present to you the egg of C hasn't really failed in any of its plans and what they've told you. The amount of money that they've received, they've been able to have something to show for, that you can really see that they presented to you. What they're asking for today, I mean, $100 a year. I can understand why. I mean, get a second job for a week, for a few hours, pay the $100, do everything, $100 a year. That is actually, in my opinion, not that I can afford it, but that is very small compared to the task at hand. We have a situation where we talked about Togo, where I think it was Olympio. Just right after independence, they were trying to get him to join the France Afrique. He said no. He created his own money, and they tried to look for ways to get rid of him. So, but all that is being asked for from you is $100 a year to start. Perhaps a year. Perhaps this might change as the requirements come up. And we do know the kind of challenges that are going to come ahead. When I mentioned Togo, the reason I mentioned Togo too was because when he refused to join the France Afrique, the money that he created, they created a counterfeit to try to flood the system to create inflation. So those challenges will always be in place by the enemy for us not to succeed. But they're asking for, in understanding the situations that we just presented to you, $100. Give that to us and see what the egg of C will come up with per year. The plans are there, the execution strategy is the mechanism is there, and the soldiers are ready to deliver. So, but overall, that is all that I can add for now. I know there's plenty of other subject matter we can expand on. Thank you, Logistics.
Thanks very much, brother. Thank you, man. It's always very relieving and refreshing talking to you or having this, live conversations with you, because this is an aspect that as we morph into nation building, we have to start injecting into our own people the idea of critical thinking, looking at how the world moves. We don't live in a silo. We live in a world. The events that happen globally, how it affects us, even after our independence, how is it going to affect us? So this is like, putting that notion of a think tank that is going to be looking out for our interests on a geopolitical perspective, how the world moves, how it affects us as a nation, as a people. We need to start having that. We're having this conversation and going. We should know that everything that happens in this world, we are being affected. And these discussions that we bring most of the time is to let our people know how hard we need to fight to free our land. Let our people know that there is nobody coming for us to help us. We will be the ones to free ourselves. We have every tool, every possibility. We have just given just one simple tool. The aspect of contributing $100 per year. If 100,000 of us contribute that, because my take is by the end of the year, I will have contributed that $100 for my entire family. Everybody, I'll put everybody's own $100 as even being my little kids. I'll make sure that everybody's contributing. We have to go to that level as AGOVCs and also Ambazonians, making sure that you are talking to your friend and you're asking him the question. As Ambazonian, have you contributed a liberation tax? Listen to what he has to say. We've said it very clearly. It's not only about the AGOVC. We are trying to structure other nationalist forces and their administrations in following through with this and making sure that they work in accordance to a liberation strategy when they collect these resources, and if they are properly used in protecting the society, the communities, making sure I give them the basic necessities that they need in that community, then we are moving closer and closer. But the AGOVC has a bigger picture with a bigger force on the ground and a bigger strategy. We call upon all Ambazonians that are looking for a way out, a structured force, to come and join in this initiative. Let's free our land together. It's our own land. That everybody owns them. All Ambazonians own Amazonia. So it's our moral responsibility to free ourselves from this shackle of slavery. Brother, thanks very much for your contributions. I know Ambazonians, I usually get a feedback from people who watch our shows, probably on ACN and the rest. They always like our show, and we promise doing this at least as soon as possible, and as the events in the world unfold. We're bringing up topics to discuss with our people and engage our people and also open up their minds, because our focus is critical thinking and looking at how things are and making sure that we really grasp how the world moves and what we need to do to free ourselves. Thanks very much, brother. And thanks to those who are follow this program and those who are still to follow it. And we'll keep on educating our people as time goes on. Thanks very much, brother, and have a blessed day.
Thank you. You too. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.